everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us on NFL Goal Line with Nick and Phil. We got a lot to talk about this evening. I'll run down the top 5 nicknames in the NFL. The Falcons are finally knocked off, and the NFL has no undefeated teams. A string of concussions have arose amongst the league, which makes a lot of problems for NFC teams. This and a lot more coming up next on the NFL Goal Line.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome inside the NFL Goal Line Studios. This is Nick Rice alongside Phil Nunziata for an action-packed Week 10 around the National Football League, and nothing better than a halftime score over in Pittsburgh. Phil, on the Monday night battle between the Steelers and the Chiefs, what do you have for us?
Well, in a game that most people thought were going to be a blowout, we surprisingly come to halftime at a stalemate. 10-10 ties so far here. At the halftime break, Jamal Charles getting in the end zone on a 12-yard run, followed by a Mike Wallace 7-yard pass from Ben Roethlisberger. Both added a field goal each in the second quarter, and we're here at 10-all at halftime. Pretty surprising, Nick.
And Todd Haley was dumped last year after the Steelers failed to make the playoff, or they did make the wild card round, and then Todd Haley was relieved of the offensive coordinator duties over in Pittsburgh. Guess what? Next year you're over in Kansas City and in a must-win game for the Steelers, despite being near the top of the AFC North. They're in a 10-all tie, as you mentioned. And looking over the quick stats here at the halftime break, it's 10 apiece, but a lot of defense in this game. No team with over 160 in the yardage category, and we have seen some big-time plays in this game. 10-all tie at the halftime break, and if Pittsburgh loses this game, what's the significance for the Steelers moving forward in the playoff picture?
Well, a team like Kansas City, you can look at this game, a Monday night game. This is essentially their Super Bowl. Kansas City, I don't know if it's been mathematically or not, but they've been eliminated from playoff contention weeks ago, at a 1-7 record here. This is obviously the biggest game on their schedule, and that's what happens when you play a team that's down, on Monday Night Spotlight. Sometimes they're able to rise to the occasion, and at least halfway through the game, that's exactly what we're seeing here.
Something to note here, the Chiefs, have never led in a game, and in this first half, at one point, the Chiefs were leading 10-3 in this game. Congratulations, Kansas City. In Week 10, you guys finally are leading in a regular season game. Might mean that the Chiefs will knock off the Steelers and go to 2-7 on the season. We'll have to wait and see. More updates on the Monday Nighter coming up later on in the broadcast. But the big game in week number 10, and we had quite a few of these games, now some that were pretty insignificant, but the biggest headline after week number 10 was indeed the knockoff of the best team in the NFL. No longer are the Atlanta Falcons undefeated, and the New Orleans Saints, even though in the Superdome, they really are shaking some heads over in the NFC South. Now, the Falcons still have a big-time lead in that division, but the significance for New Orleans is now there's a chance for a postseason berth. Now, they're still a long way from the playoffs with a losing record, but 4 out of their last 5 in the W column, and the Saints haven't played mediocre teams. They've gone on a big-time roll against great opponents. Now, we mentioned weeks ago that the Saints might have had a few games that should have gone the other way, but a win's a win, and New Orleans at 4-5 has a realistic chance, Phil, for a playoff berth.
Yeah, this was a huge win for them. Aside from knocking off Atlanta, from the realm of the unbeaten. Here's a team you mentioned. 4 out of the last 5 games ended up being a win, and a team that historically, at least recently, have had success against the Falcons since Matt Ryan took over as starting quarterback, and Mike Smith coming in as their new head coach. They've only beaten New Orleans 2 times, so they were able to keep that, firmly in their favor going on, into the coming year. So just a big win for the Saints. Falcons no longer undefeated, and for a while, it was looking laughable that the Saints would make the playoffs. But now, you really got to think about it. It is a possibility. Still got a lot of work to do, though.
NFL Goal Line on Spreaker.com. The call-in number 951-515-4552. Again, 915 951-515-4552. New Orleans knocking off the Atlanta Falcons, and the concern for Atlanta moving forward, the reason why weeks ago when I did after week 8 the power rankings for the midway point of the season is for a kind of outcome as this. Now, the Saints defensively are laughable in some instances. Even though they've won 4 of their last 5, they're barely doing more offensively. But the impressive part of the Saints and what really put the Falcons off guard in this game was the fact that they were able to run the football. And I mentioned that they aren't as good of a defense. Their secondary is among the best in the league, and Asante just makes that defensive unit better. But the concern is up front. They don't have an elite pass rush, and they also don't have a rushing defense to contend with big-time running backs. Chris Ivory was just one of those players that came into this game trying to make an impact to win this game. And on that one play, the 56-yard touchdown, he made the entire defense look silly. What's the concern, Phil? Now, this is moving forward. The Falcons are still, despite a complete meltdown, on their way to the playoffs. The concern for the Falcons or the Falcons overall is, in fact, that defensive unit. Will this be the Achilles heel in the playoffs, or at least preventing them from going far in that once the postseason hits?
Well, if you're in that Falcon locker room, you're trying to take positive from this, and I think what you can take from it is, it kind of wakes you up. It brings you back down to earth. There's been players in the past that have been on teams that are undefeated through halfway and closer towards the end of the year that have admitted that not that you ever go out there wanting to lose, but when you get that first loss, it kind of helps you settle back down. You don't have that pressure of an undefeated season on your shoulder breathing down your neck. It's one of those things, maybe it refocuses them. It takes a little stress off them that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And, the defense might be able to rebound from that. Obviously, they got to that undefeated record with this same defense and these same players. So they obviously have a formula that will, at least to some degree, work for them. And it's just a matter of time to see if they're able to. Obviously, they're going to rebound from this loss. I would say they're a great team, great organization, and only time will tell if it ends up working with this defense in the playoffs.
Not just me, but a lot of people have got to be a big-time supporter of Mike Smith. I'm a fan of the guy that has really turned around this team, where last year, after the season, losing in the divisional round of the playoffs in embarrassing fashion, actually the wild card round, after that game, they were already a good team. And then what the Atlanta Falcons did is they tried to make the team better, where they took care of both the coordinators on both sides of the ball. They got rid of them and retooled house. That's hard to do with the winning record, to try to retool house after a great year. But the Falcons are even better than last year, at least talent-wise. And in this game, certainly the first time all year that they've had any sort of disappointments. And in the remaining 7 games on their schedule, only one team that's a division winner. That is the Giants in Week 15. The Atlanta Falcons just string together 10, 11 wins, and you're on the way to the playoffs with a weak division that you have with the Buccaneers barely getting over 500 now, and then the Panthers and the Saints both with losing records so far. The Atlanta Falcons are on their way to the playoffs as long as they don't have a mediocre meltdown. The same is the case with what we just mentioned, those New York Giants. Now, after a 6-2 start, it's been a meltdown, and Eli Manning has taken the blame here. But a 31-13 shellacking, blame is all over the team, and it seems like in November, this team has won the Super Bowl 2 of the last 5 years, so I can't put too much blame on the fact that they aren't struggling during the past couple games. But this went back to the Dallas game where after a big-time lead, their defense seems to relax under, with a lead. They seem to take it easy. Cincinnati had a tremendous second half and wins again. Is this defense a concern, Phil?
Well, I think, I've been saying this about the Giants for years. After winning a championship, they've been known to be a team that, takes their foot off the gas, whether that be for a quarter or, a couple weeks in a row. That sense of, the Packers talked about after winning their Super Bowl that, you can't lose that hunger. You cannot be satisfied because there's nothing easier to beat than a team that's satisfied with what they've already accomplished. And the Giants coming off, being defending champions and, having this good record going into the rest of the year, they might have finally hit that point where there's players on that team that are satisfied with the way things are going, which would explain them dropping 2 in a row.
And the defense at some points looks absolutely pathetic. In this game where Cincinnati climbed to a 31-6 lead at one point in the fourth quarter, I mean, we're seeing receivers wide open down the field for 60-yard touchdowns. We're seeing Eli Manning after a half second already under pressure. We're seeing plays that really shouldn't happen and haven't happened all year for New York. They're 6-2, and it almost seems like, here we go again. We're Super Bowl champions defending that trophy, and we're just on our way to the Lombardi again. And that NFC is a lot tougher this year with, teams like the Packers rising up along with Atlanta like we just mentioned. This defense doesn't seem to be elite anymore. And a lot of Monday morning press conferences mentioned that has Eli Manning lost his zing on his arm? Are they saying it's fatigued now as we enter November? The Giants are on a bye. I don't believe that his arm is fatigued. I just believe that the team around him is underperforming.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of everything. I think the fact that they're on this bye week is definitely going to help them, reassert themselves, maybe get some guys together and get some stuff out in the open. I think a bye week is I think this is a dictionary definition of why we have bye weeks, to give teams like this a chance to stop and regroup. So, it's a situation, they're still leading their division, not by as much as they were, obviously, before this week with a loss and the Cowboys winning. We'll get to that later. But, here's a team that, maybe just needs a fire lit under them to perform better, and maybe they got a little too comfortable and starting to pay for it. So time will tell now if they're able to rebound from it.
Time will tell, because coming off the bye, they are home against the Green Bay Packers. And it was a similar scenario last year where the Giants struggled down the stretch, and then against the undefeated Packers, they were oh so close to beating that team, and that was the kickstart to what would be a Giants Super Bowl run. Now, I'm not saying that the Giants are in that same scenario this year, but certainly their schedule after the Packers somewhat favorable to enter the postseason, as they do indeed in that last week of the year, another rematch against the Philadelphia Eagles. That one could be, as we mentioned at the beginning of the year, could be the NFC East deciding game, as the Giants lead it now, and the Eagles, after what is a failed season so far, they'll try to get some teams bouncing from the playoffs. We'll have to wait and see how this division rounds out. Giants at 6-4 have a bye, then somewhat of an easier schedule. And for a team that defensively ranks under 20th in the league, 21st in total yards given up, certainly a second half that should be tough. Just reading down the schedule here, after the Packers, they do indeed face the Redskins. That's always a tough out. Then they have the Saints, Falcons, Baltimore Ravens, and then the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Is this a 10-win football team, Phil? As it seemingly in the NFC East only needs 9 to 10 victories to make it into the postseason.
Well, after reading off that schedule, we're going to find out pretty quickly if the Giants are for real, because, that's got to be one of the tougher lists of teams that are left for any team, for the rest of this season. So, they're not going to get in, off a cakewalk of just beating some teams and, okay, yeah, we're going to show up. No, these are games that if they do not bring their A game, they will lose. It's just as likely for them to win 2 or 3 of these games as it is to drop, 4 to 5 of them.
And I'm seeing Tom Coughlin after this loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. It's been 2, perhaps 3 games that really should have gone in the loss column. And Tom Coughlin, all he's saying is, I have the same reasons as last year. It almost just seems like the Giants are sitting on a Super Bowl trophy, and it showed in the game today. It wasn't even close, this contest. The Giants made it close with a last-second touchdown. This team just seems to be, for lack of a better word, just seems to be completely, lack of effort. That's all there is to it. They have zero passion, and in this game, defensively, it was just embarrassing. And if the Giants don't pull off this tough schedule, we could see New York miss the playoffs yet again this year at 6-4 right now. But it'd be quite a disappointment to start 6